He wasn't a hero. He wasn't a general. He was a mid-level officer on another boring night shift in a concrete box outside Moscow. September 26th, 1983. A damp, cold night over the forests near Serpukhov. Behind a high concrete wall and 3 lines of barbed wire, a 2-story gray building hummed quietly under yellow floodlights. Inside, time ruled everything. 2344. Fluorescent lights buzzing overhead. White walls. A long hall that smelled of cheap paint and floor polish. And behind one heavy steel door, the room that was not supposed to make mistakes. The early warning command center. He walks in with a dented aluminum mug of instant coffee. 2 spoonfuls, no sugar. 44 years old. 21 years of service. 2 transfers. 2 failed marriages. 1 12-year-old son who wrote him short, messy letters. His rank doesn't matter to the viewer. To the system, he is one thing. Duty officer, missile attack warning. In the hall, a metal plaque says, Post number 1, number of combat shifts this year, 271. In the main room, there are no windows, only light. 12 rectangular lamps in the ceiling, 8 of them flickering slightly at the edges. 5 giant screens on the far wall show a map of the northern hemisphere, sliced into blocks. Green oceans, pale land. Along the center row, 6 consoles. Each has a monitor, a phone, and dozens of buttons that can wake up people in other buildings, other cities, and, if things go very wrong, other continents. Above everything, digital red numbers glow. 23, 44, 03, 23, 44, 04, 23, 44, 05. He takes his place at the central console, the nerve ending where space, electronics, and politics collide for a few seconds before becoming orders. To his left, the main OCO satellite screen. To his right, the panel that talks directly to the General Staff and the Strategic Rocket Forces. 4 phones in front of him. Black, internal, green, backup, cream, technical, red, the line you don't want to use unless the world is ending. He signs the logbook. Entry number 314. Shift assumed. Situation normal. Next to the log lies a thick folder stamped secret. 187 pages. Title: Instructions for actions in case of detection of an ICBM launch by the enemy. He knows it almost by heart. 30 seconds for initial technical check. 60 seconds to report to shift commander. 120 seconds to report to Moscow. Dozens of paragraphs with words like immediately, without delay, strictly. Not even once. If you have doubts. Doubts do not fit into the doctrine. The first 30 minutes of his shift could be any night of that year. 007. An operator on the left curses quietly when the wheel of his chair falls off again. 012. A technician walks by with a box of replacement bulbs. 015. 2 soldiers from internal troops make their patrol around the perimeter, write "no incidents" in a notebook, and blow warm breath into their gloves. On the wall, a cheap calendar shows September 1983. Days are crossed out up to the 25th. The 26th is circled in red, not by order, not because of fate, just because the duty officer likes to circle the current date. Above the Earth, satellites silently scan the oceans and land, sending down millions of numbers. Heat, light, movement. Here, all of that is compressed into a few short lines on green screens. Sector North 3, normal. Sector South 2, normal, 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 normal. He takes a folded piece of paper from his inner pocket. His son's handwriting, uneven and stubborn. "Hi, Dad. We fixed the old tape recorder. The neighbor's boy says your job is boring. Is it? 13 lines about school, football in the yard, and how Dad is always on night duty again." He reads it for the 10th time, not moving his lips, then folds it with the same care as a classified map and puts it back. Somewhere, 11,000 kilometers away, on an American base in North Dakota, another man sits in another concrete room, watching another radar screen. They don't know each other. They will never meet. But tonight, their worlds are tied together by one simple fact. If one side believes the sky is on fire, the other side might decide to light it for real. 0024. The indicator over the door blinks green. Communication. A short ring. Internal line. "Status?" asks the shift chief from the adjacent hall. "Status normal," he answers. He writes in the log, 0025. "Connection with SC? Normal. This is the night's job. Confirm that nothing is happening." And then, at 028:17, something happens. It starts with almost nothing. A soft click under the console. A slight change in the pattern of light on the satellite screen. One small square on the map brightens. Just a tiny new glow over the United States. The system assigns a label to the light. On the top edge of the screen, a word appears in red. Launch 1. Beneath it, numbers draw themselves in a cold mechanical script. Source, USA. Number of objects, 1. Estimated time to impact, 23 min 40 sec. For 4/10 of a second, there's only the silent text. Then the sound hits, a high, sharp tone, repeating every half second. Not loud in absolute terms, but in this controlled, humming room, it cuts through the air like glass. The operator to his left instinctively leans forward, eyes wide, fingers hovering over his confirmation keys. The shift chief pushes his chair back. It slams into a metal cabinet with a hollow bang. The duty officer feels the world narrow to 3 things: the screen, the clock, the red phone. 028:18, 30 seconds. That's what the instruction gives him for primary verification. 30 seconds to decide whether the machines are lying. 30 seconds before the first words leave this room and start climbing a ladder of ranks and titles that ends at the top of a nuclear superpower. He presses the switch that moves the system from monitoring to combat assessment. Green indicators flip to yellow. Operators 3 and 4 put on their headsets in silence. He hears one of them whisper, almost inaudibly, marking one target, tentative ICBM. His fingers move over the panel with mechanical precision. Cross-checks, backup channels, cloud cover data over the apparent launch area. On the wall is a large map of the USA, divided into zones. One small region in the northwest has a red rectangle sticker, missile fields. Until tonight, that was just a spot on a training poster. Now, it is the place where, theoretically, someone turned a key. At 0028:24, everyone in the room knows 3 words. Launch confirmed, 1. 6 seconds later, the neighboring hall is screaming with the same alarm. 2 men sprint down the corridor, boots slapping the linoleum. The operations officer and the communications technician. It's just 20-25 meters of hallway. But in their heads, it feels like a tunnel between 2 different timelines. One where nothing happens tonight, and one where 30 minutes from now, entire cities cease to exist. 23 seconds after the first signal, he lifts the red phone. On the other end, a duty officer in Moscow, in a building with no name on its facade. The distance between them is 95 kilometers on a map, 2 hours by car with traffic, zero point 0.2 seconds by cable. His voice is calm, professionally flat. Satellite system reports launch of 1 ICBM. Data follows. Time, sector, estimated trajectory. He reads numbers. Numbers are safe. Numbers are neutral. The logbook fills with a new line. 02841. Reported launch 1 to General Staff. On paper, this moment looks boring. Another line. Another timestamp. In reality, this is the exact second when a chain reaction of human beings and hardware begins. Somewhere in Moscow, a major writes this information on a clipboard. A colonel passes it down a table. A general lifts an eyebrow. A secure briefcase with nuclear codes sits in a steel safe in another room. Everything is still reversible. So far, it's just one launch. Then the system changes its mind. 50 seconds after the first glow, the screen flickers again. A second bright square appears, then a third, then a fourth. The code updates itself, as if the machine is calmly correcting a typo. Launch 4. New numbers flash. Number of objects, 4. Estimated targets, objects in the USSR. The alarm tone shifts into a continuous, suffocating shriek. This is the first mini-apocalypse in the room. 4 targets. Not a glitch. Not a single insane captain launching one rogue missile. 4 independent calculated trajectories. 4 needles aimed at a map that, from this console, looks suspiciously like home. Heart rates in the room jump. Nobody has time to count, but if you had a monitor on each chest, you'd see pulses spike to 120, 130, 140 beats per minute. The duty officer no longer notices faces, only screens, digits, and the second hand. 02927. If this is real, these are not dots. These are futures. If you zoomed far enough out from that glowing map, you would see millions of people asleep. A boy hugging his pillow in a Khrushchevka apartment. A girl falling asleep over homework in Leningrad. A woman in Kiev turning off a kitchen light. Ground floors, bus stops, factory gates, hospital wards. 4 warheads. 4 suns that were never meant to rise. And on another continent, 4 arcs traced on their own screens, in their own language. If this were an exercise, they would have been warned. There would be a line in the schedule. Training scenario no, so. He would have signed a special sheet before his shift. He slides a paper list of planned tests closer. 2 pages, small font. No mention of simulations tonight? Now his palms sweat for the first time. The coffee on his desk has gone cold, a thin film on top. The room is still 20 degrees, but a line of damp appears under his collar. 02935. A senior officer enters the room, uniform half-buttoned, hair still creased from a pillow. Deputy head of the site. He needed 27 meters and 30 seconds to get here since the alarm went off. He doesn't ask many questions. How many? He says, eyes already on the screen. 4 targets, maybe 5. Time to impact unchanged. The duty officer answers. The deputy glances at the red digits on the wall. 0.2950. Outside this windowless room, the night is quiet. On post number 2, a conscript writes in his notebook, 0030, no incidents. Inside this room, an incident is already rewriting someone's future. He knows the timing by heart. From first detection by satellites to radar confirmation, about 15 minutes. From detection to potential order for a retaliatory strike as little as 8. That's how long it takes for machines and men to decide if civilization continues. In his personnel file, there are phrases like emotionally stable, highly reliable under stress, capable of decisive action in non-standard situations. On paper, he is built for exactly this moment. The red phone rings again. 0030 12. Now the voice on the other end is not just a duty officer. The tone is different, cleaner, harder. Reports show multiple launches. 4, possibly 5. Do you confirm a missile attack? The key word is confirm. Confirmation is not a technical note. Confirmation is a trigger. If he says confirmed, the process accelerates. Nuclear briefcases are opened. Codes are checked. Generals are pulled from beds and meetings. Missile regiments go from ready to almost firing. The instruction book has a neat sentence for this. Upon confirmation of multiple launches, initiate escalation to level. A calm line of text. Behind it, hundreds of underground silos, submarines, bombers. He doesn't answer immediately. The manual doesn't contain a field for gut feeling. It doesn't ask, does this make sense? But he does. 4 to 5 missiles. Enough to start a war. Too few to win one. Somewhere, in the back of his mind, an old technical report flickers. The system may occasionally mistake reflected sunlight on high cloud layers for rocket launches. He hears the voice in the phone again, sharper now. Your assessment? They are asking for a number, not a code, not a rigid yes or no. A percentage, something that will be written in ink somewhere deep in a secure safe. Duty officer's assessment. He looks at the glowing Launch 5 on the screen. He looks at the clock. 0:30:20. He sees 2 images at once. On the one hand, a schematic from a classified training handbook. Arrows, circles, yield figures, zones of total destruction. On the other, the yard in front of his building, where his son plays football. 3 apartment blocks, a sandbox, a rusty swing. One warhead would erase it all in under a minute. No heroic music, just white light, wind, and silence. He speaks slowly, choosing every digit, 70 to 30 in favor of a false alarm. Not 60-40, not 90-10, 70-30. A compromise between the data he mistrusts and the apocalypse he cannot allow himself to unleash. On the other end, someone writes it down, pen scratching paper. The line will be filed, stamped, archived. For now, it just buys time. 0031:05. 2 more men enter the room. A political officer, 30-something, neat mustache, face trained to look confident, and a security officer whose real job is to watch everyone else. Officially, they are here to ensure discipline and morale. Tonight, they are also witnesses. The political officer delivers a line he has said 100 times in briefings. Comrades, remember, you are carrying out a combat mission to defend the motherland. Usually, this is background noise. Tonight, the word motherland has weight. It is not an abstract idea. It is a map with 15 republics, 260 million lives, dozens of cities that can be turned into silent craters in less than half an hour. For a brief moment, the duty officer imagines the same room existing somewhere under Omaha or Washington. Another man in another uniform, staring at a different screen, maybe seeing nothing yet. If he says, attack, and they say, attack, the rest of the world ceases to be scenery. It becomes a target list. Suiro 33, Sao. The number of missiles on the screen is still the same. 4, maybe 5. No wave of hundreds. No massive swarm you would expect at the beginning of a real first strike. The alarm feels less like an explosion and more like a needle drilling into the skull, over and over. He updates the logbook again, then does something the manual never suggested. Mark these entries as preliminary signal, he tells the operator quietly. A tiny act of rebellion. 2 extra words in an official line. Some inspector can yell at him for it tomorrow, if there is a tomorrow. SRO 34, SRO 5. A new indicator blinks. Radar on. Ground-based stations are beginning their sweep. It will take seconds, maybe a minute, for their verdict to arrive. The system is now running on 2 sets of eyes, one in orbit, one on Earth. Between them, a man with a red phone. As he waits, he thinks about something nobody ever put into any doctrine. He thinks about what happens if he's wrong in each direction. If he calls it an attack, and it's nothing, the world survives. But he may trigger the single most destructive overreaction in human history. If he calls it a false alarm, and it's real, entire cities disappear, including the one where his son is sleeping. There is no safe option. There is only a choice about how the world ends. SRO 35-27. The red phone rings for the 3rd time. No greetings. No formalities. The information has been relayed upwards, the voice says. The question remains, do you confirm that a missile attack on the Soviet Union is underway? This is no longer a technical request. This is the sentence they will pin on him in any future report, any future investigation, if anyone is left to investigate. On the wall, the digital clock reads 00:35:40. The screen still screams Launch 5. Ground radar has not yet reported incoming warheads. The air feels thicker, as if the oxygen has been replaced with something heavier. He feels the weight of the phone in his hand like a brick. In his pocket, his son's letter crinkles softly as he shifts. Outside, beyond concrete and wire, the forest is black and silent. On the perimeter, a conscript glances at his watch and writes, 00:36. No incidents. In this room, there is one incident, and it is balanced on the edge of a single word. The voice on the other end repeats, slower, each syllable sharp as a switch. Comrade duty officer, do you confirm that a missile attack on the Soviet Union is in progress? He looks at the clock. 0:35:47. If he hesitates too long, others will decide for him. If he answers too fast, he may help erase everything he's sworn to protect. 21 years of service. Hundreds of uneventful shifts. 5 glowing missiles on a green screen. 70%, 30%. One life, one decision. He draws in a breath and opens his mouth to answer. He doesn't shout. He doesn't give a heroic speech. He just exhales once and answers the question that is hanging over hundreds of millions of lives. Negative, he says. I do not confirm a missile attack. I consider this a false alarm. Silence on the line. Not static. Not a click. Just human silence. The kind where someone on the other end of a secure cable suddenly realizes they now share responsibility for what comes next. The voice finally comes back, flatter than before. Understood. Your assessment is recorded. They hang up. In the room, the alarm keeps screaming. The red text keeps burning. Launch 5. For the next few seconds, nothing in the physical world changes. No lightning bolt. No divine sign. Just an officer standing in a fluorescent-lit room, holding a red phone that suddenly feels much heavier than before. 03610. The deputy commander stares at him like he hasn't decided yet whether this is courage or insanity. You understand? He says quietly. If you're wrong, we will get no second chance. The duty officer nods. If I'm wrong, he answers, we'll know soon enough. That is the horror hidden behind the calm words. There is no way to test his decision except to wait and see whether cities explode. On the far wall, the giant map shows 5 thin arcs, predicted trajectories. If someone had the nerve to overlay those arcs with daylight photos of Soviet cities, the room would be uninhabitable. From this angle, it's just geometry. From orbit, it would be 5 tiny dots in a black ocean. From ground level, it would be melted playgrounds, collapsed hospitals, trains fused to tracks, a world turned into one long emergency that nobody can answer. He sits back down. His chair creaks like nothing important is happening. 037. Ground radar stations continue their sweep. Somewhere hundreds of kilometers away, giant parabolic dishes rotate over dark fields. Operators in other bunkers lean closer to their own screens. If real warheads were coming over the horizon, they would soon see them as harsh green ghosts. Each blip a piece of metal moving faster than a rifle bullet. Each path a line toward a city, a base, a communications center. In the command room, the political officer wipes sweat from his upper lip with a crumpled handkerchief and tries not to look like he is watching the clock. The security officer looks only at the duty officer, not at the screens, not at the map, at him, like the system has temporarily decided the main potential threat is one man's judgment. 038. Nothing changes. No new launches. No confirmation. The system still insists. Launch 5. The satellite sees ghosts. The Earth sees nothing. 03920. The red phone rings again. This time, the voice is tighter, as if speaking through clenched teeth. Radar still detects no incoming targets, the man in Moscow says. Satellites still show 5 launches. Your assessment? He could take the easy way out now. He could say, yes, it must be an attack, and let the responsibility dissolve upward into names that will never be written in public. Instead, he repeats, slower. I maintain my assessment. Probable false alarm. We should wait for ground confirmation before changing readiness levels. On the other end, there is an exhale that is almost a hiss. You realize, the voice says, if we wait too long and it's real. He cuts in, just once in his entire career, interrupting a superior on a direct line. If we launch on shadows, he says, we will be the ones who start this war. The sentence is not listed in any manual. It is not authorized language, but it is the only sentence that makes sense to him. There is no answer. The line goes dead. He sets the phone down and feels, for the first time, the faint tremor in his hand. 041. Someone in the room finally snaps. What if they're just trying a limited strike? One of the younger officers blurts out. Take out command centers, then negotiate? That's what the exercise is always. The deputy commander raises a hand. His voice is low, but it cuts through the alarm. Enough. This is not an academy seminar. He turns to the duty officer. If this is a mistake, he says. They will bury you in paperwork. If this is not a mistake, there might not be anyone left to bury. It is meant as dark humor. It lands as truth. The duty officer gives a humorless half smile. Then let's give the world a chance to keep its gravediggers busy with something else, he says. 042:10. Another indicator lights up, a small square that means first radar sweep complete. Everyone who understands the system knows what this moment is. If there were missiles in the sky, this is when the ground would start screaming too. The operator at the radar console reads the line that appears once out loud, as if afraid the words might disappear if he doesn't say them. No confirmed ballistic targets. Sky is clean. The alarm is still sounding. The satellite still believes. The room stands still for 2 full seconds. Then, like a rubber band snapping, people begin to move. Run the sweep again. Check auxiliary stations. Compare with backup satellite data. Questions, orders, overlapping voices. For the first time in 15 minutes, the duty officer feels a tiny crack in the nightmare, a thin beam of ordinary logic. No radar, no debris, no shockwaves, no flashes. If this were real, parts of the sky would already be rearranging themselves. 044. The red phone again. This time the voice is different. Less pressure, more weight. Ground stations still see nothing, the man in Moscow says. Secondary checks agree. Space segment continues to report 5 launches. Your original assessment is noted. There is no apology. There is no, "You were right." Just that small phrase, "is noted," which, in the language of classified bureaucracy, means, if this turns into a scandal, your name will be in the file. If this never leaves these walls, your name will be nowhere. Maintain monitoring, the voice adds. Do not change the log entries already made. The line clicks off. The duty officer realizes he's been gripping the edge of the console so hard his knuckles are white. He lets go. Blood returns to his fingers in a painful rush. 047. The alarm stops. Not gradually. Not with some ceremonial gesture. Just a technician at another console flipping the status from attack back to normal monitoring and hitting an acknowledgement key. The piercing tone cuts off mid-beep. On the screen, red text blinks twice. Then the 5 launches disappear, replaced by the old comforting word, normal. The room feels louder now, even in silence. You can suddenly hear every rustle of paper, every cough, every squeak of a chair. The deputy commander checks his watch and says, in a voice that desperately wants to sound routine, "Record. False alarm from space-based system. Cause to be determined. Continue duty." Continue duty. As if the last 19 minutes were just a glitchy fire drill. As if the world had not just been standing on one foot over an abyss. The duty officer writes in the logbook, in his careful, school-taught handwriting, 047, satellite indication of missile launches not confirmed by ground-based radars, assessed as false alarm, no change in readiness level. One dry line. It will never capture the reality of what those words mean. He expects to feel relief. He doesn't. Relief is for people who don't know how close they were. Instead, he feels something heavier. A delayed tremor in his chest. A cold sweat on his back. A sharp, intrusive thought. What if I had said, attack? In that branch of reality, somewhere in a different dead world, This same clock hits U0.47 with a different set of numbers written beneath it. Lists of cities hit, estimates of casualties, diagrams of craters. He imagines, unwillingly, his son's school as a crater on a classified aerial photo, a smudge in black and white with a number under it. He doesn't sleep after his shift. There are debriefings, questions, diagrams on whiteboards, angry men in uniforms asking the same thing 3 different ways. Why did you decide it was a false alarm? On what basis did you override the system's indication? Do you understand you violated the spirit of the instruction manual? He repeats the same simple truth. Because the ground radar saw nothing. Because the scenario made no sense. Because I believed the system was wrong. No one says, thank you. No one says, you may have prevented global war. The closest thing to praise he gets is a cold sentence from a senior officer. You were lucky. Weeks later, a technical commission finds the reason. A specific alignment of sun, earth, and clouds over the American Midwest. Reflected sunlight fooled the satellite sensors. A coincidence of geometry. In reports, they call it an error condition of the space segment. They do not call it the day the sun pretended to be a nuclear war. Somewhere deep in a classified annex, there is a paragraph that reads, in the incident of 26.09, 1983, the duty officer at the Missile Warning Center assessed the situation as a false alarm and did not recommend a retaliatory strike. This assessment prevented escalation based on incorrect data. That is the entire recognition. No medals, no speeches, no public record. He is quietly moved away from frontline duty later, not as punishment, not officially, simply because, in a system built on obedience, a man who has once said no to the procedures, even to save the world, is unnerving. Years pass. The superpower whose fate hung on his words collapses for other reasons. Old bunkers are emptied. Old satellites fall out of orbit. People forget how close they sometimes came. He lives in a small apartment with faded wallpaper and a pile of old certificates in a drawer. He is interviewed once or twice by minor journalists. His story circulates as a rumor among retired officers before it slowly leaks into the outside world. The narrative is always the same. One man's hesitation saved the world. He hates that version. It makes it sound like luck. He knows it wasn't luck. It was work. It was judgment. It was the choice to trust logic over fear. Sometimes at night, he lies awake and stares at the ceiling, replaying that 20-minute slice of his life. The scream of the alarm. The red Launch 5. The question on the phone. His own voice saying, "No, I do not confirm." He doesn't feel like a hero. He feels like someone who simply refused to be the fuse. Decades later, a documentary will show grainy photos of that control room. People on YouTube will write comments like, "Crazy how close we came." Imagine if he had panicked. This one guy saved us all. They will see a story. He lived a decision that never made the front page, a decision that never appeared in school textbooks, a decision that turned a potential chapter called World War III into a footnote called False Alarm in a classified report. In the end, the truth is brutally simple. For 47 minutes, the fate of millions depended not on machines, not on doctrines, not on steel and circuits, but on one tired officer in a windowless room, looking at a lying screen and having the courage to say, "The system is wrong. We do not end the world tonight."